Alright guys, welcome back to Underground Science, and in this video we'll be talking about our upper motor neurons. Alright, so hopefully you guys just came back from my lower motor neuron video, right? We discussed the lower motor neurons and the basic function of those, and now we're going to discuss upper motor neurons. Alright, so pretty much just think of upper motor neurons as being the boss of the lower motor neurons. Alright, so the upper motor neurons are going to control what the lower motor neurons do. Alright, so the boss, but let's put that in quotes because it's not like actually scientific. So boss of lower motor neurons. All right, so the lower motor neurons are the boss of the skeletal muscles that we discussed in the last video, and the upper motor neurons are the boss of the lower motor neurons. Okay, so they control the lower motor neurons. The upper motor neurons do. All right, so knowing that, let's go ahead and dive into this picture again that we had that I tried to draw, but hopefully it's not that bad, and hopefully you guys can stick with me in this video and go through this picture and get the concept down. Okay, so this this shaded region right here in the up in the on top of the cerebrum, right in the cerebral cortex. I just said what I was trying to say. This shaded region all around is going to be the cerebral cortex of the brain. All right, so this is just a front view of the brain. So cerebral, it's not 3D, cerebral cortex. All right, so we're just going to label the parts that we need to know to understand upper motor neurons. Okay, and in the last video we mentioned that right here is about where the medulla oblongata ends. All right, so this is where the separation begins from the medulla oblongata and the spinal cord. So this is going to be our medulla. Let's go and choose a different color. Medulla oblongata. All right, sorry about this dot here. Oops. Medulla oblongata. All right. So our medulla oblongata is our last part of our brainstem. And just to let us know that the brainstem, we'll go over brain parts in a future video, but our brainstem consists of our, let's go ahead and write it down with blue. So our brainstem begins with our mesencephalon, all right, so mesencephalon, which is just another word to say brain or midbrain, all right, so our midbrain. And then we have our, let's go a different color, we have our metencephalon. Okay, that didn't end well. Let's go and fit it in better. There you go, metencephalon. And another word for metencephalon is our pons. All right, and with our pons comes a cerebellum also, but the cerebellum is pretty much the little brain, all right? That's what it stands, or that's what it's called. And the cerebellum, you guys can see, is right here. I tried to draw the arbor vitae of it, which are just lines of white matter. All right, but mostly the second part of the brainstem is the pons, and then the last part of the brainstem we just mentioned is the medulla oblongata. All right, or also called the myelencephalon. Oops, not I, it's a E this time. Myelencephalon. All right, myelencephalon. And the myelencephalon, again, is also the medulla oblongata. All right, medulla oblongata. All right, sweet. So that's the parts of the brainstem real quick. So upper motor neurons, right? So let's talk about how it works in our spinal cord. How do the upper motor neurons control the lower motor neurons in our spinal cord? All right, so let's draw it out. So first, let's go ahead and show where was our lower motor neurons in the spinal cord. So instead of drawing on the zoomed in version right here, let's go ahead and draw it right here because we already went over in the last video. So it's going to be better to understand. So remember, our soma and our dendrites of our lower motor neurons reside in our gray matter of our spinal cord. And then we have our axon extending out and terminating at a skeletal muscle. So let's just go and draw this skeletal muscle right here, right, with striations, right? We're getting gains. Actually, let me draw those striations with, yeah, there you go. All right, so let's say that's our skeletal muscle, right? And we have neurotransmitters here that are inducing the contraction of the skeletal muscle. Okay, so that's our lower motor neuron. And remember, we said the upper motor neurons were the boss of the lower motor neurons. So the upper motor neurons are going to control the lower motor neurons. All right, so let's go ahead down here. And in the cerebral cortex, in particular, our motor cortex, our primary motor cortex, let's say in this picture is right here, okay? Let's just say, actually, you know what? Let's just say it's right here because we already drew something here. Let's make it more clear. Let's say our primary motor cortex and our precentral gyrus. All right, so remember, again, we'll go over the brain structures in another video, but just to quickly state it, right, we have a structure called the central sulcus, okay? So it's just like a groove, you can say, that divides the frontal lobes of the brain, right, the two halves of the frontal lobes, and it divides the parietal lobes, all right, the parietal lobes of the brain, all right? So we have, remember, the two halves of the parietal lobes and our two halves of the frontal lobes, two halves of the frontal lobes. And this is our central sulcus, all right? This is our central sulcus, and our precentral gyrus is just in front of the central sulcus, right on the beginning of the frontal lobe, all right? So our precentral gyrus is actually right here. All right, so this is our precentral gyrus right here near the central sulcus in our frontal lobe. And in our precentral gyrus, we have our motor cortex, our primary motor cortex. All right, so precentral gyrus. And from here is where our upper motor neurons originate, okay? From our motor cortex of our cerebral cortex in our frontal lobe. Okay, so let's go and draw that out. So again, our somas, our cell body and dendrites start in our cerebral cortex. So we can go and draw that out. So our dendrites and soma right here. I'm going to try to squeeze in the soma, the cell body, but this is still in the cortex, all right? And then the axon, and the axon is going to be projected out, right? It's going to go through the white matter of the brain. Right, so let's say it's coming all the way here. Actually, no, let's draw it straight. Let's draw it more straight. It's coming here. And what's going to happen here is a very important thing, and this is why people say, this is why it's said that the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body mostly, and the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body most of the time, okay? Because we have a decussation over here. So what that means is our upper motor neurons decussate or cross over right where our brainstem ends. All right, and this is going to go here and then synapse our lower motor neurons, right, releasing certain neurotransmitters that is going to control this lower motor neuron, all right, that are going to control this lower motor neuron. And based on whatever the upper motor neuron tells the lower motor neuron, based on that, the lower motor neuron is going to either fire an action potential down its axon and do its job, all right, or it's not going to do its job, all right, based on whatever the upper motor neuron tells the lower motor neuron to do. All right, so this is our upper motor neuron. Let's go and label that. So upper motor neuron. All right, so remember this part we said was called decussation. All right, so the upper motor neurons are going to decussate. So decussation. All right, so actually let's go and write that in a darker color. I can't see it. So we're going to have decussation. That's why our right side of the brain, again, we just said this controls the left side of the body, and our left side of the brain most of the time controls the right side of the body. All right, so this is the decussation point. This is where our upper motor neurons decussate and cross over. So that's why if our right side of the brain is like damaged or something, right? So if our right side of the brain is damaged, what that would mean now, by looking at this picture now that we've learned what decussation is, that would mean that our left side of the body, our muscles on the left side of the body would probably not work as well, right? Because remember, our upper motor neuron starts on the right side of the brain, then it decussates and crosses over into the left side of the spinal cord, right? And then it stimulates this lower motor neuron to contract our skeletal muscles, right? On the left side of the body, though. This side is our left side of the body, all right? So let's go and write that down. And so this is our left side of the body, and this is our right side of the body. All right, So that's why we say our brain halves, or right side of the brain controls the opposite side of the body. So the left side of the body, and the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, okay? Because the same thing would happen on this side. Our upper motor neurons and our cerebral cortex, particularly remember in our precentral gyrus of our motor cortex, which is, our motor cortex is in our precentral gyrus, right? In our frontal lobe, we would have, again, same thing here. Let's say we had some dendrites right here, right, in our soma. Let's say this is also part of the motor cortex. Source, oops, let's draw the same color. Our soma's in the motor cortex, in the motor cortex of the cerebral cortex. And we have our branches of our dendrites here. And then we'd project an axon down, right? But over here, we would cross over. And then we would come here to the gray matter, where remember our dendrites are for our lower motor neurons and our soma is, right? That's where it is, in the gray matter. And then here we have dendrites that would pick up these neurotransmitters released by the upper motor neuron. So let's go draw the synapse out, right? And some neurotransmitters getting released. We would have dendrites of our lower motor neuron ready to do its job, right? We would have our soma cell biting the gray matter, and then our lower motor neuron project an axon out and terminate on a skeletal muscle, right? A striated skeletal muscle. And then we would contract the skeletal muscle. All right, so let's go and draw the striations out, right? And our neurotransmitters. And then see, so the same thing happened here. Our upper motor neuron, in our motor cortex, started from our left side of the brain, but then it decussated and controlled a lower motor neuron on the right side of the spinal cord, which then controls a skeletal muscle on the right side of the body. So that's a pure example of seeing how the left side of the brain controls the opposite side of the body, and the right side of the brain controls the opposite side of the body, which is the left side, right? So the skeletal muscles. Now, we saw this, but let's go ahead and see upper motor neurons, how it works when we're talking about stimulating the lower motor neurons in the brain stem, right? Remember, we have lower motor neurons in the spinal cord being part of the spinal nerves, and then we have lower motor neurons in the brain stem taking part of the cranial nerves. All right, so let's go and look at that in another page. All right, here we are. So let's go and let's quickly look at upper motor neurons terminating on the lower motor neurons that are found in the gray matter of the brain stem, okay, that take part of the cranial nerves and stimulate the contraction of skeletal muscles. Remember from our previous video of the head, neck, and face muscles. Okay, so let's say our upper motor neurons, again, the upper motor neurons originate in the motor cortex of the cerebral cortex and go through the white matter. So let's go and draw that again. All right, so our soma, again, is going to be part of this motor cortex, and our precentral gyrus, and we're going to have some cool dendrites popping off, right? We're going to have our axon hillock, and then we're going to have our axon, okay? And let's say our axon comes here and here through the white matter of the cerebrum, and it terminates right here, and it synapses on a lower motor neuron in the brainstem, right? The gray matter of the brainstem, and this lower motor neuron looks like this, has dendrites receiving the signals from the upper motor neurons, right? We have cool neurotransmitters present, released by our upper motor neurons, and then our lower motor neuron takes those signals, gets action potentials down this axon, and terminates on a skeletal muscle near the head, face, or neck region. And since it's skeletal muscle, we're going to have it striated, and then we're going to have contraction, right, of this specific skeletal muscle, whatever it is, okay? So, but one thing you noticed here, right, unlike our previous slide where we talked about upper motor neurons in our cerebral cortex stimulating lower motor neurons in our spinal cord, we saw decussation crossing over occur about right here, right near the end of our brainstem, end of our medulla oblongata. But here, when an upper motor neuron is stimulating a lower motor neuron that begins in our brainstem gray matter, right? Sometimes we'll see decussation and sometimes we won't, depending on whatever upper motor neuron it is. Okay, so see, this upper motor neuron started on the left side of the brain, and it also stimulated a lower motor neuron on the left side of the spinal cord, right? So overall, what happened, the left side of the brain controlled one of the muscles of the head, neck, or face on the left side of the body, right? So remember, this side is the left side of the body, and this side is the right side of the body, okay, based on this picture. Okay, so this time the left side of the brain controlled the left side of the body, all right? But sometimes what can happen is that we do have opposite control, meaning the right side of the brain will control the left side of the muscles, left side of the body, the specific skeletal muscles on the left side, in the head, face, or neck. Okay, this is when we're talking about lower motor neurons that leave the brain stem. Okay, so what can also happen is this. So we're going to have some soma cell body here. Sorry about that. A soma cell body here of an upper motor neuron. And then we're going to have an axon going through the white matter. And then we're going to have let's say it terminates on a lower motor neuron here in the brainstem, right? And then we have our soma here and our dendrites. And then we have our neurotransmitters that are released by the upper motor neurons. And then we have our axon, right? So right here in this example, we just saw that we have the right side of the brain. When we're talking about lower motor neurons that originate in the brainstem, the right side of the brain had an upper motor neuron starting from the cerebral cortex stimulate a lower motor neuron on the left side of the spinal cord this time, so it's the opposite side, which led to the stimulation of a skeletal muscle of the head, neck, or face region, right through a cranial nerve on the left side of the body. So this time it was opposite control. The right side of the brain controlled the head, face, and neck muscles of the left side of the body, but sometimes the left side of the brain can also control skeletal muscles of the face, head, and neck on the left side of the body, the same side too. Okay, so it can be both. And so last thing, so that's it for upper motor neurons for the brainstem. Upper motor neurons that stimulate lower motor neurons of the brainstem, right? So let's go back and remember, we're back to our lower motor neurons of the spinal cord. And so I just showed two axons here, or two neurons, two upper motor neurons and then two lower motor neurons, right? All of this. But in reality, there's, a lot, okay? So all those axons together, right, that stimulate the lower motor neurons in the spinal cord, right? So the upper motor neurons stimulate the lower motor neurons in the spinal cord. That's going to be our corticospinal tract, okay? So a tract is just a bunch of axons, okay? So this is going to be involving our corticospinal tract, all right? So our corticospinal tract will involve upper motor neurons beginning in our cerebral cortex, and it's going to be a tract of axons, right? A bunch of axons, bunch of neurons that stimulate our lower motor neurons and our spinal cord, right? Hence the corticospinal part, and it's a tract because, again, it's a bunch of axons. All right, and most of the time we're going to have decussation, which means that our right side of the brain is going to control the skeletal muscles of our trunk and limbs of our left side of the body, and vice versa. Our left side of the brain is going to control skeletal muscles of our trunk and limbs on the right side of the body. All right, and then this right here for our lower motor neurons that originate in our spine or our brain stem. Again, there's going to be way more axons and neurons that I drew here than I drew here. So upper motor neurons that stimulate the lower motor neurons in our brain stem, right? These lower motor neurons and upper motor neurons together are going to be called the Corticobulbar tract, okay? So again, I didn't say it properly, but Corticobulbar tracts, right? Corticobulbar tracts, all right? So I just a tract. So it's a corticobulbar tract because it starts in the cerebral cortex, right? Our upper motor neurons start in the cerebral cortex, and we go down to the brainstem this time, all right? And we stimulate a lower motor neuron in our brainstem, and then that will lead to a contraction of a skeletal muscle of our head, face, and neck. Okay, and we have a bunch of axons like that, upper motor neuron axons, which is why it's called a corticobulbar tract, right, as compared to our corticospinal tract. So that's it, guys. That's the basic overview of our upper motor neurons. and corticospinal and corticobulbar tracts. And hopefully you guys liked the video and it made sense, right? I really hope it did. I really hope to see you guys in my future videos where I'll talk about more cool topics about biochem, physics, and chem. And so don't forget to hit that notification bell so you know when I'm publishing my future videos. And don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, guys? And see you guys later, and stay safe.